Hello, and welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays break down each episode of their favorite Star Wars TV shows while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and today we are joined for Mando Episode 1 by a guest. Do you want to introduce yourself? Although I think you would be familiar to anyone who listened to our Andor or Mando Season 2 or Mando Season 1 coverage.
Hi, I'm Aeron Llewellyn. You might have heard me before.
Yes,
I'm back again.
It's because I can't get enough of the history stuff, and several audience members have expressed to me that they love the history stuff, and so anytime I see an episode where I'm like, this seems like a topic Aeron would know about. I'm in our group chat like, Aeron, do you want to come on and talk about boomtowns in the Old West?
Oh, good. So long as it's me coming back like, hey, I'm back, and not Bryce.
Oh, God.
Remember me, motherfuckers? I'm back again, unfortunately for you.
You would be the Bo-Katan Kryze of this podcast. Just constantly showing up again like, surprise, I'm still here.
I'll take it.
I also still think that Aeron could cosplay Bo-Katan extremely well. I'm not just saying this because they're both gingers. Like, there's no real way you can see what Aeron looks like anywhere publicly, but I promise she looks like a younger Bo-Katan.
Oh, I've worked hard on that. I'm so proud of myself. So proud, but yeah.
Wait, that's actually very controversial to say that because according to fucking this show, Bo-Katan is like 70 years old for some reason.
She's like somewhere between 45 and 60. And we get contradictory information from interviews as to exactly how old she is. I think they estimate she's around her late 40s in this show.
Oh, I have questions about like the natural lifespans of Mandalorians and if that differentiates from, real life Earth humans. But I'm still making the confusion about my age work for me at the age I'm at. I won't say how old I am, but it's people will say, and they pause. I'd like to thank my parents for their excellent genetics and highly recommend moisturizing your face.
Moisturizing is good. I personally do a very good skincare regimen that has kept me looking a few years younger than my actual age. And speaking of people who are different than their actual age, I don't know where this segue was going. It's time to begin in earnest our conversation of The Mandalorian. Quick disclaimer at the top of this first episode. So all of the other episodes we are going to record from this season, we will be doing retrospectively. We will have seen all of the other episodes. Now, we never approach it that way. We always stick to the content of whatever's in the episode we're watching or episodes previously, which is also good. Because Aeron was telling us at the top of the show that she has not actually seen anything past this episode we're talking about.
Truly blind.
So she's truly blind.
Control group here.
To what's going to come. Although I do want to say, in case anyone gets super mad at us, and there is one big point in particular that I feel like I can't address until I've seen the whole season. So just as an FYI, Bradley and I have seen everything up through episode 7 of the season. Aeron has seen only the first episode. So that is how we are coming into this.
You gotta have a control group. That's the only way.
Gotta have a control group. I'm sure Jordan's probably listening to the show because I think she only listens to the Aeron episodes and nodding her head along with, yes, that is how you do science. I am a scientist and agree with you.
I'll let her know. She'll agree.
She'll agree. She agrees with so much and never contradicts me about anything. It tells me that I'm wrong, which I usually am. Anyway, speaking of people being wrong about things, Bradley, you want to take us into this season of The Mandalorian?
Yeah, and what's funny is when I was writing my script, I forgot that I don't usually say the title until we get to the title card. So this was like a learning curve going back to this format of doing this.
Yeah, you haven't had to do any fucking work since Andor.
I know, and that's why
I'm
like,
okay. It's been 18 weeks.
It's been 18 years or whatever.
For context, anyone who's just joined joining us on the show, and Aaron, who looks mildly confused. Bradley only does scripts, so only does summarizing the beats of the episode for the live action shows because it helps us segment them out. When we do the Bad Batch, like we have been for the past 16 or so weeks, he just gives a little brief tagline at the top, and we just go from there. So he's just had a lovely little 4-month vacation of doing absolutely no work. While I scramble to do all the fucking research in this show.
Wow. The descriptors you do scene by scene are very helpful. I was listening back to your Book of Boba Fett and some of the last Mandalorian episodes to kind of like remember what had happened because I have the memory of a goldfish. And your breakdowns really do help a lot. They're quite good and succinct.
Well, good. We'll get into the first part in a second, but so what I'll just to remind everyone, what we always normally do is I'll introduce the episode and then a brief summary of the episode, and then of course one thing you guys liked and one thing you didn't about the episode. So on that note, let's start with The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 1, where the Mandalorian begins an important journey. Aaron, what is one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
One thing I liked about this, and this is the standout moment in the episode for me personally, which there's some really great, like for the story scenes in there, and there's some really great filming scenes in there, like from a filming perspective. The thing that stood out to me the most that I, hit the 10 seconds back button a few times to just rewatch it again because I loved it so much was the bit where they're traveling through hyperspace to get to Navarro, I believe. And they pass by a space whale pod and you see Baby Yoda. There's no dialogue. Baby Yoda is watching the space whale pod go by in hyperspace and he climbs down out of the little droid window and Mando is asleep in the front seat, autopilot on. We're calling him Grogu now.
He's
right?
Grogu now.
Okay, in my notes, he's Baby Yoda all the way through. Grogu, he climbs down out of there, and then you see him like pop up under Mando's arm the way like, I don't know, my dog has done this when she wants pet, or I've had cats do it to me a lot. Pops up under Mando's arm and crawls into his arms while Mando is asleep, while Din is asleep, and cuddles up in his arms, curls up, and just takes a little nap. And it's so cute. It's so sweet. My first watch through this was with my father, actually, and he hates it when I talk during the movie. But he interjected and said, "Oh, he feels safer when he's being held." I'm like, yeah, he does. And he looks at me and he's like, you used to be that small. I'm like, cool. I'm an adult now. Thanks. Cool. That's nice, Dad. Anyway, we're watching a movie. Let's address these emotions at a later date, preferably never. But it's so cute. And on my rewatch, I just hit the back button a couple times and went, oh. Anyway, that was the thing I like. It has no bearing on the plot, really, but I think it, emotionally, their relationship is really truly like a parent and child and getting to actually act out that attachment that they have. It's so sweet. Anyway, that was the thing I liked. The thing I didn't like, I'm not sure I like in my rewatch was the part that I kind of zoned out during and didn't take much notes, was the chain of events where we are rebuilding a PC and he seems really great at hardware. He does not comprehend software. I know he wasn't good with droids before this, but I'm sitting here watching back like, that's not how computers work. That's not, buddy. Okay, if the memory is blown, it's not, okay. It's not the whole I want a droid that I trust thing. Is like as someone who's, rebuilt parts of a PC and a Mac. That's not okay. No, I didn't care for that as much.
One thing that I liked about the episode, I like the sense that a lot of time has passed. And I know this was controversial on a meta level because of some things that Jon Favreau said. We're not going to address this, but I do like how in the episode, it is abundantly clear that at least from the end of the Book of Boba Fett to now, some time has passed. The Mandalorian covert has rebuilt. They have gathered some other Mandalorians back that were scattered after season 1. We also, we see that Navarro has changed slightly, and Din has had the chance to go and have this adventure where he found this crystallized piece of Mandalore that he shows to the armor at the beginning. One thing I didn't like, I didn't like how the episode ended. And I remember when I watched the episode the first time, when I watched the premiere, because I do think I stayed up late to watch the premiere, it just kind of ended. Like, it doesn't end on any substantial note. All of the other episodes, even though this season has decided to do more serialized storytelling, so it's decided to tell a single cohesive story over 8 episodes, as opposed to 8 separate, vaguely connected episodic adventures. The issue that I have is that they sort of end this episode, and also, like, we're not going to talk about where the season is going. In hindsight, I see how they might have thought that was a strong ending, but watching the episode the first time, you're like, okay, there's really no resolution. He's still doing the same thing he's been doing for most of the episode, which is prepare to go to the mines of Mandalore. And especially the fact that he doesn't actually go to the mines of Mandalore in this episode. So I didn't really like how the episode ended. What about you, Bradley? One thing you liked and one thing you didn't?
One thing I liked, I love the return of, favorite characters, right? So I loved seeing, of course, Grief Karga coming back. I like seeing Bo-Katan coming back, even IG-11 coming back, for a little bit. I think I love the season 1 kind of almost vibe that this had. What I didn't like, I'm with you, is the structuring of the episode. And it's just like, in hindsight, like I don't like, we had this discussion with Chris in one of our last episodes about how it's when it's on streaming, the time frame for this episode doesn't need to follow conventional time. Like, the episodes don't need to be a conventionally like there's no like actual 30-minute show or 45-minute show structure. Like, it doesn't need to have that because it is on streaming. So you can have the episode as long or as short as you want. I feel like this episode does a very similar thing where, like, the next 5 minutes of episode 2 should be like the
Bingo.
ending of this episode.
Yes.
Bingo.
So, without like going into episode 2,
Well,
it's
spoiling
like,
for Aaron, yes.
right, exactly.
The opening scene of episode 2
scene
should have been the ending scene of this episode.
Good.
100%.
Good,
Yeah.
because it felt unfinished.
Okay, yeah.
To
It
me,
definitely is.
Too, yes.
Now, and I like what your point, Charles, was that the reason why they did this is because it is a connective 8-part story over the course of the season. So it is all one big story. However, it's just not quite segmented correctly. Just it's a little off.
I see how they could look at Bo telling Din to fuck off as like a major point in the overall structure of the season, but I can't say why because Aaron hasn't watched it yet. But
We'll get to it.
It just doesn't hit.
Yeah.
I will say, coming from Andor being the last piece of Star Wars media I consumed regularly, Andor was so well structured and paced that it felt Andor, I just loved Andor. Andor was very good. It was a bit of a whiplash coming into the new like vibe of the show from that, and also Andor again so well paced that this felt choppy, not necessarily because it is bad, but because it's not necessarily as well planned out, perhaps. Or like you guys pointed out on your Book of Boba Fett coverage, there's a whole interlude where it becomes Mando season 2.5 and really makes me feel like, okay, this is it feels like sifting through and finding the things that go together in the right order without having a really well planned out order. Yeah, it just felt a little messier.
I think too, like a lot of Star Wars fans kind of went through the same journey. I know we went through it with Bad Batch because I was pretty down on the first 2 episodes of Bad Batch. I watched the first 2 episodes of Bad Batch and I was like, fuck is this? I mean, going back to it, it was coming down from the Andor high. And Andor being such a different, excellent show that the pulpiness of how The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch were written, for me, I had to kind of adjust my brain to get back used to that. And I am going to be interested to see if we have to go through the same thing after Andor Season 2 or The Acolyte. I do feel like The Acolyte is going to raise the bar again.
Okay, let's talk about the recap, because normally we don't cover the recap in the Mandalorian
Normally we
season,
don't.
because we don't need to. However, this is a very special case because this recap did something very interesting, which we theorized back in our episode 0 was that how are they going to explain how Grogu and Mando are back together in episode 1?
And what's the answer, Bradley? What did they tell us?
The answer is they just randomly threw in Book of Boba Fett clips in the season recap without distinguishing Book of Boba Fett from The Mandalorian season 1 and season 2.
Oh, hold on. No, because it gets even better. You know what's not in the fucking recap? Any explanation at all how they got back together.
Right.
It's not there. They recap his relationship with the armorer and his relationship with... But if you're watching... Yeah, with IG-11, because both of them are going to be important in this episode. But if you wanted to know why Grogu is back, fuck you. Go watch the Book of Boba Fett. You shouldn't have skipped it.
Yeah, I had to go back and... I'm not good at finishing shows. I had to go back and actually... I'm really not. Yeah, I had to go back and finish watching the last episode of Book of Boba Fett because just in case the reunion doesn't happen in Mando, I should probably cover, what happened to Mando in that last episode of Book of Boba Fett. And it's a good thing I did because they do, Grogu leaving Luke off screen and they have Pelimoto wonderfully pop in with Grogu like, I brought your baby. Oh no, everything's trying to kill us. Oh dear. And it's a fun scene, but it's in a completely different show. And you're not told probably watch Book of Boba Fett. And if you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett, well, screw you. You missed a whole bunch.
They just kind of assumed people watched Book of Boba Fett. And that's part of the issue. And we discussed this in our celebration episode when I was theorizing about Heir to the Empire. I was like, my big concern is that they'll approach Heir to the Empire like assuming you've seen all of the Mandoverse shows, that you've watched Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Skeleton Crew, Ahsoka. And it's kind of the Marvel problem to where my hot take is you should be allowed to skip Star Wars shows that don't really interest you.
They should be able to stand on their own.
Right. And I think the issue with not doing Book of Boba Fett under like a Mando subtitle, like The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, or the Book of Boba Fett. Honestly, even that titling thing to say, hey, it is part of the Mandalorian story, and you do need to watch the whole thing. It is go in the sequence here, and Ahsoka the same way.
Not to bring in an opposition on the stage of sci-fi into the mix, but Star Trek has been working around this problem for a long, long time.
They're knocking it out of the park recently.
Yeah, they've been doing pretty good. Historically, they've always kind of done the show thinking, okay, you might not have watched, you're watching Deep Space Nine. Everything about this show rests upon what's happened in Next Generation. We start off with basically the battle that launched this show, but they show you scenes from it from a character's perspective we've never seen before. So you're filled in on what happened before in a new way. So the people watching that are coming from the old show know what's happening. But the people that are watching for the very first time are filled in. You don't have to go back and do your homework. Probably because it aired back before streaming was ever a thing. They can't rely that you were able to have access to the TV show when the last one aired.
You would have to have gone to the video store and rented, and like the video stores, at least in my town, they rented like per disc. So you had to rent the first 4 episodes of something.
Oh, this was the 90s.
This was the 90s.
Yeah,
you had to go rent the first 4 episodes. Like I remember getting the Ewoks and Droid show, and you would rent a disc from like the Blockbuster or something, and it would only have like
convention.
Or you find the guy at the convention that would have like
the VHS.
The box sets. Yeah, and I'm remembering even after when DVDs came out, they used to be only able to fit like 4 episodes on a DVD. So you would get go to the video store as a kid and you would pick do I want to watch Droids number 5 through 8 or 9 through 12? And you would get the disc and then you would take it home and you would watch all of the episodes. This was the days before streaming. Anyway, I want to point out that one line they've chosen to include in the recap is the line, "There is only one way, the way of the Mandalore," that Din says to Bo. We're not going to address it this episode, but everyone collectively put a pin in that. We will come back to that in 6 episodes. But I want to point out that line was said.
Cool.
So anyway, that was 15 minutes on just the recap from the last season. Bradley, do you want to take us into the opening of this season?
Absolutely. So we begin with the armorer and a group of Mandalorians holding a ceremony to induct a young child, Ragnar, into the tribe. The ceremony is interrupted when an alligator-like creature attacks the Mandalorians. The clan initially fails to defend themselves, but are saved when Din shows up and unalives the creature with a torpedo. Grogu is also here and somehow was reunited with Din. Title card, Chapter 17, The Apostate.
I think it's a really interesting choice for the season to start with the armorer. Because the armorer, what the armorer is up to, what her deal is something that this season has been not so much exploring as it is muddying slightly.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that they elected to start with her. And it also leans into this season being not so much about Din Djarin as the Mandalorian, but about the Mandalorians as a whole and a people as a whole. So I think it's really interesting to start with the armorer forging a helmet.
Yeah. Like I said, I was watching back, episodes from Book of Boba Fett, and suddenly, after having watched this, going back and caught up with Book of Boba Fett, first rewatched some of those episodes, specifically the episode where he goes back and is declared an apostate, and was just obsessed thinking about the armor. There is so much going on with her. I don't know if I'll be able to get into it later, but the thing that stands out to me that I don't remember if you might have covered it in your episode coverage. She's sparring with him during that episode while she's working on the mail shirt for Grogu.
Yeah, when she's trying to train him how to use the darksaber.
She knows that it can only be one in combat. At no point does she just take it from him, and she can.
And Paz Vizsla tries.
He tries.
That's a really interesting point. We didn't bring that up, but yeah, she could 100% just challenge him for the darksaber and take it.
And
then she would be in charge.
True.
I think that she knows that, one, she has a lot of power over Din Djarin. She doesn't need to take it from him. If she ever wanted that role, she is best suited to operating behind the scenes because of the amount of soft power she has over him. And two, I don't think that she is served in any way by going back to Mandalore. I think she knows that she is more powerful away from that center of where they are actually from.
Yeah, because she has that level of control, I guess would be the word that I'm looking for, over the Mandalorians. As long as they're this people in exile, she has a great deal of influence to where, if they were back on Mandalore, and Aaron, I think you're gonna find this season real interesting.
Oh,
the direction
certainly.
this goes.
And to tie this into what we open up on her forging the helmet, but also a baptism that she is the one conducting this baptism. She is the one in the highest up in this particular sect that we have seen. And she is the one that young people, you said his name was Ragnar?
Ragnar. We won't find that out for 3 more episodes, but that's only a mild spoiler. This kid's name is Ragnar.
Some Viking vibes. Love it. Makes sense for the Mandalorians. Checks out. But
it will also make a lot of sense when you find out who this kid is.
Great. Fantastic. Looking forward to it. But yeah, she's the one that's conducting these confirmation ceremonies of sorts. If she's the one conducting these confirmation ceremonies of sorts that induct people into becoming a Mandalorian within their sect, I'm guessing she's done it for all of the people that aged into this that were the foundlings in the Children of the Watch, to the point where on my rewatch, I started looking around for how many of these people are children. I'm just trying to figure it out based on their height. How many of these people are children?
Because all of those children would have probably gone through the same ceremony.
And we don't know how many of them are just young people like Din's age or younger that are adults technically, but still younger than the armor. How many of these people has she personally inducted into this?
Speaking of that kid, now we're not going to recap every single actor we've seen before. We have done Mando Season 1, Mando Season 2, and Book of Boba Fett. We are not going to cover, this is who Pedro Pascal is. This is who Carl Weathers is. We assume by the time you've gotten to Season 3, you know who these people are. However, this kid is an exception, and there may be a few other exceptions of people who've also appeared. There actually is one big exception later on, but this kid is an extra special exception because he was a major character in the Book of Boba Fett as well. And I did want to shout him out. This kid's name is Wesley Kimmel. If you don't remember who he is the nephew of Jim Jimmy Kimmel. You know who Jimmy Kimmel is.
Yeah.
He is the Tusken Kid in the Book of Boba Fett. So he plays the Tusken Kid. And let me double check something.
Oh, lucky for him, they can bring him back because we didn't see his face last time.
We didn't see his face, so now we
Right.
get to see him again. He does not, as far as I can tell, have a Disney trifecta yet, but he is one property away. He has to appear in a mainline Disney property, because in addition to being the Tusken Kid in Book of Boba Fett, he's commercial boy in WandaVision. He's in one of the commercials in WandaVision. So he has appeared in a Marvel thing. It doesn't look like any of the other things he's appeared in. It doesn't look like he's appeared in a mainline Disney thing.
Yeah.
So he's one away.
Time and enough.
Right. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen when your uncle's Jimmy Kimmel. And I mean, the kid's a good actor too. Like I imagine he'll probably have an excellent career, but
Okay.
he's doing pretty okay. I think he does best when, at least from what I've seen him in the show, he does best as a movement actor.
Mm-hmm.
He's a lot better when he's in the helmet.
Yeah.
When he's having to actually.
Oddly enough, yes.
Oddly enough, he could have a really good career as like a creature performer. That would be. He is his role as the Tusken Kid, like. Unbelievably expressive, unbelievably good, and that character didn't have a single line of discernible dialogue. But when the Tusken Kid dies, I was genuinely mad.
Yeah.
I was mad for a lot of reasons.
I was also furious. Yeah, once he has the helmet on, when we see the gator turtle show up on the beach, because it looks like a gator and it does a death roll like a gator, but it has a shell like a turtle. So I think of it, I have it in my notes as gator turtle. His movement acting, you can understand everything about his chain of thoughts as he's running around, like wants to go help people, and then he freezes, and you know exactly what he's thinking from just the choices he's making moving around. Great job. How old is this character supposed to be? Or maybe how old is the actor?
They don't specify. I mean, he's young. I don't think he's more than like 13 or 14.
He looks about 10 or 11.
It doesn't say.
It doesn't have to be specific. I only ask because in the mainline Protestant church I was originally raised in, confirmation happens at about 11, 12 when you're old enough to make the choice to join the church, and they do a whole ceremony very much like this.
Another mild spoiler for you, but I'm not going to say too much about it because I do want you to genuinely have the moment. The ability to speak the creed is very important to the path to becoming a quote unquote Mandalorian as defined by the Children of the Watch.
That makes sense.
So it does have a lot of shades. I didn't even realize he pointed out that it has a lot of shades of Catholic confirmation.
All of the traditions have something like this. There's centuries of quibbling over whether you can baptize someone as a child or baptize someone as an adult. And mostly the consensus has come on, you can dedicate a child as a baby, and then as an adult, you join and become a member of the church, is usually how it plays out in my experience.
Yeah, I was baptized at around age 7 or 8. So I was really in the church. Like I went to a religious private school and I was in church twice a week. So I didn't know anything else. So I was really excited to do this. And when I started experiencing things outside the church by going to public school, and then we had an incident where we got kicked out of a church. So we had to shop around different churches, and that had the inadvertent thing of demonstrating like how this all works. And if you had asked me at 18, do you want to be baptized? My answer would have been no.
That's it. I had both experiences. I was the religion the sect I started off in, they do baptism as a baby with the sprinkling. I think it's aspiration, they call it. And then the tradition I was in as a young teenager when I was 13 after the confirmation in the other church. So become a member of one. And then my family's like, we're going to shop around. I'm like, okay. And then in the new one, they do baptism as an adult, and you can do it again anytime you want because this is evangelical fundamentalist Christianity. And they do a full-on dunk, submersion in water. And this, it looks like they're doing a combination of both. The whole time I'm sitting here thinking, oh, the Mandalorians do a combination of dunking and sprinkling. Interesting.
Speaking of comparisons between the Mandalorians and actual real religious groups, I'm going to come into this kind of in a disclaimery politician way. So there's been a lot of we'll charitably call it discussion, amongst fans of the show as to, based on the new information that we're getting in season 3, whether or not the Children of the Watch count as a cult. Now, I'm not really going to have that conversation until we see what the hell is up with the armor, because for me, a lot of it is going to boil down to, is the armor genuinely trying to keep alive traditions and is trying to evolve the religion in a direction that it can survive, versus is the armorer using the tenets of the religion as a directive to control the members of her particular Mandalorian sect. For me, it's going to boil down to that, so I'm not really going to hop into the, is this a cult or is this just an orthodox religion? There are certainly a lot of discussion around that. What I would rather do with that on this particular episode, all that said, we don't want to make, as of yet, any sort of determination on whether or not this is a cult or this is like more an orthodox religion that is just in exile. Rather than focus on that now, even though I stand by everything I said in the previous 3 seasons of this, I would rather use it as a springboard to hear about some examples of this having happened in our real life, because there's a lot of cases, both in cases of Orthodox religions that have been removed from their homelands or removed from a land in particular, and also cults that have had this happen to them. And there was one big cult that had this happen to them that, Aaron, you let me know, like, I immediately thought of this because of the Old West vibes. Do you want to talk a little bit, just some history for our viewers, again with the disclaimer that we are not making any direct comparisons here between the Children of the Watch and any of the groups that Aaron is about to talk about? With that disclaimer out of the way, Aaron, do you want to talk to us about some religious groups in exile?
Yeah, so I will say the one that would primarily come to mind for both a lot of historians and probably for a lot of people watching would be the expulsion of the Jewish people from their homeland, where we get the word diaspora from. It's a Greek word, it means to scatter, and I believe it originated specifically to describe what happened to the Jewish people as far back as, because it happened multiple times. Under multiple rules, Babylon, Rome again. But
if you read like the books of the Old Testament, like if you actually go through and read the whole thing, yeah, it's like a revolving door of the Jewish people they will settle in their homeland and then something will happen. According to the Old Testament, which is the only version of this that I've read, usually the people will piss God off and he will let them get conquered and then they will eventually get freed and go back. And it's this revolving cycle of this keeps happening over and over and over again. But the big one, of course, being Rome. Rome eventually does come in and like does their Rome thing.
Yeah, the conquest of Rome and Judea. And to the point where if you look at diaspora studies for the first 100 years of there being written academic papers on it that you can access, that I could access, about 90% of them are about the Jewish diaspora, fueled in part, of course, after the Holocaust. People definitely started writing more about it. And now we apply this term to a lot of different groups that have been, exiled or thrust from a place for various reasons. Like you've got the Irish diaspora after the Great Famine. Diaspora that happens for non-religious reasons after Hurricane Katrina. Tons of people, this is a climate crisis diaspora that, people are thrust from their homeland for this reason. Tons of people had to leave New Orleans and never come back again. Basically climate refugees from this natural disaster. And in the case of the Mandalorians, are survivors of a natural disaster that destroyed their planet. And
not a natural disaster.
Not a natural disaster. A man-made
very unnatural disaster. A man-made disaster.
That sounds like propaganda from the Empire there.
Sorry.
Aaron, are you spreading imperial propaganda?
No, the thing I was thinking was a climate disaster.
Camino was totally destroyed in a giant freak storm. Never mind that Camino definitely has had storms for hundreds of years and has been fine. line, the specific storm was bad enough to destroy the cloning facilities. Don't worry about it.
Pay no attention to the nuclear fallout.
Exactly. The planet is poisoned by stuff, we promise. So I guess my sort of follow-up question would then be, I don't know if you would know the answer to this, Aeron, but what differentiates a diaspora from a refugee crisis? Is it the not having somewhere to go back to? Is it sort of everyone being gone from a place?
That's an interesting question.
Because my first thought, I've been listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast a lot, and my first thought was, oh, that's just like sorry to Bradley and everyone who doesn't play Dragon Age, it's just like the Fereldans fleeing to the free marches. But then I'm like, no, it's not exactly the same, because the Ferelden people are still there. It's just the people who were in specific villages in the south, they got overrun by the Darkspawn. There's this giant wave of them going up to the free marches because fuck Orlais. Yeah. So my question is like, or I guess the thought that I would have is, what is the difference between a group, religious or otherwise, in diaspora and just a whole bunch of people left here for reasons?
So there is an answer to that. Sometimes diasporas, in the modern day, when we talk about a diaspora, sometimes diasporas happen out of choice. Nowadays, when scholars and political scientists talk about diaspora to refer to people making the choice to leave a place. For example, when you talk about Americans living abroad, they'll refer to as the American diaspora, basically people that started off in one place and went somewhere else. It's now used as a more neutral term than just a refugee crisis, a group of displaced peoples. Historically is used to refer to people who have left for a number of reasons. I guess in this case, what we are describing is closer to a refugee crisis, though my assumption would be the people who survived the destruction of Mandalore were people that were already outside of Mandalore at the time. And so
I will not answer whether or not that is accurate.
Because we know that the Children of the Watch, they were on
the moon of Concordia, yep.
And we see Bo-Katan on a castle, on a planet in the Mandalorian system. And so
we will get to what that planet is.
Without knowing for sure, my guess would be that you might say that the people that are surviving right now were the existing diaspora at the time, people who had left for reasons, not necessarily because of the destructive incident.
We see this a bit in Star Wars 2, not to cut in, but we also see this a bit with the Alderaan, people from Alderaan.
Yes.
Especially in the comics, there's an entire comic, but it's mentioned too in Aftermath Life Debt and Aftermath Empire's End, that the Alderaanian people who were off the planet when it was destroyed. There were a lot of them because Alderaan was a very big player on the galactic stage. There was a lot of Alderaanian people that were, when the planet was destroyed, were basically like, what are we going to do now? There's no planet. They do eventually, they get parts from the Death Star. They actually get parts from the Death Star, and as far as we know, they have constructed sort of a space station type thing in the ruins of the remains of Alderaan. So that's what Leia actually also steps down being the Princess of Alderaan. She passes the royal title over to someone else, but that's a whole different thing. I did want to ask quickly before we move on. I know you cited one specific example with the Old West kind of vibes of the Utah-ness of it all.
It gets to Utah eventually.
And again, massive disclaimer, we are not trying to draw comparisons between the Children of the Watch and this specific group. Aeron just found this group really interesting.
I just think they're neat. I wanted to start off with the more like historian-y, scholarly definitions and examples because that's where the word diaspora was kind of coined, because this is all based on our conceptions of the American Old West. And because this group is first and foremost, they exist only because of America. They are the American religious group in the sense that they started here. They did not go through a climate crisis or a nuking of their home world, but they were obsessed with trying to find Zion and then reestablish Zion and then get kicked out of Zion, what they thought was Zion, and then declare a new thing Zion. And it's the Church of Latter-day Saint, who, for various reasons, their founder, Joe Smith, starts out in New York. He has to get out of town because it's not easy to run a religion in the town you grew up in, goes to Ohio, then wears out his welcome in Ohio, goes to Missouri. Claire's Jackson County, Missouri.
If you've seen Book of Mormon, you will know that they believe that the Garden of Eden was in Jackson County, Missouri.
Yes.
This is one of the things I know about them.
And then wear out their welcome to an extent for various reasons that I will not get into at this junction. Sure, wear out their welcome to the extent
we don't have enough time to talk about how shitty of a person Joseph Smith was.
Yeah, Missouri puts a hit out on all Mormons. There is a kill on sight law in Missouri enacted by the governor that did not come off the books until the 1970s, if I recall correctly. They get out of Missouri to Illinois, then bounce back to Missouri. At one point, they found a city called Nauvoo, which is hilarious to me because whenever someone says Nauvoo, I confuse it with Nauvoo. And whenever someone says Nauvoo, I confuse it with Naboo because they sound so similar. And I'm just going to say both made up. These are both made up words.
Yeah, because I know that the Mormon Church did like a lot of bouncing around.
They did a lot of bouncing around, and eventually their founder, for reasons, gets killed in prison. And suddenly you have this group where their founder, the guy who ran things, he's dead. And they splinter to the winds. There's a faction that stays and that goes down back to Missouri, where there is still a hit order out on them. And they become a faction that, oh God, they have such a generic name that I don't. Basically, it's run by his first wife, Emma Smith, and their son, Joe Smith III. And then there's a faction that goes up to Wisconsin. And then there's another faction that goes down south towards Arizona way. And the last is the group that led by Brigham Young out to what's now Utah. And they're the one that lasts partly because this particular guy was really good at, he saw, okay, I'm going to need to isolate these people, consolidate them under my control, and get everybody really good at just having survival skills and wanting to, basically a whole generation of people is brought up that is very bloodthirsty in a way that is like, okay, if you are against us, it's a kill on sight. Well, not quite that. I'm making a lot of generalizations, but
you're trying to sum up a lot of Mormon history in about 5 minutes.
Yes. And with any religion that springs from Christianity, it's easy to found a splinter group and say, we're doing it like they did in the old days, because you're not doing it like they did in the old days. The FLDS, the Fundamentalists, Latter-day Saints, there are so many iterations of them because at various points they go, you're not doing it the way the prophet Joseph Smith did it. We have to go back to the original way that he did it. And there's a built-in mechanism where you can go back and say, you're not doing it the way they did in the start. And Christianity does this a lot too. Other world religions do this a lot too. I cannot speak for Judaism and Islam, but I will say that in Christianity, the thought is always, well, we have to go back to the basics, the way that the church in, say, the Book of Acts was run, the way that the church was run when we were first kicked out of Rome or whatever. But I will finish off by saying those groups that decide to go back to basics, for lack of a better term, they are what we now call fundamentalists. They want to go back to the fundamentals of the religion. And without knowing what happens later in the season, I'm just going to say, I would find it very unlikely that there was ever a version of Mandalore that ran exactly like this. I think that this is an example of fundamentalism, a fundamentalist cult that is going, we're going to follow the rules as explicitly written, because even if you take these rules as explicitly written in the old days, did people ever really follow them exactly like that? Like if you look at the Code of Hammurabi, there's a reason you write down rules. It's a lot of times they're more guidelines than rules. And
it's because somebody's not following those rules and you need to put down on paper somewhere, like how to deal with this.
And it's always one copy of the rules. You can't say that a whole planet followed those rules exactly. The wonderful thing about history and the documents that you are served by history is if you pick the right surviving documents, you can build a version of history from that. And I think I can say one thing about studying history, it's that you will never know anything for sure. You are always learning with new information that's being dug up. Anything I say can be easily disproven if we just find new source documents. It is always changing because you will never fully, truly know exactly everything that happened without a time machine. And I think this is an example of a fundamentalist splinter group that, because they were trying to survive, saw that this was the way to do it. They already had some fundamentalist leanings when they were on Concordia.
When they were Death Watch, because
when they were Death Watch.
The whole sort of Death Watch was more of a conservative political movement, to where we don't like this pacifism that Satine Kryze is trying to bring. We don't like, we think that's anti-tradition, anti-Mandalorian.
And then if you think that Bo-Katan was cursed by, what was it? She was gifted the Darksaber.
She was gifted to the Darksaber. So Sabine, who is a different person than Satine, basically finds the Darksaber, wins the Darksaber in combat, kind of. And then, she has to fight Gar Saxon for it, Bradley. I see Bradley kind of...
Doesn't Maul kill Gar Saxon and get it?
No, Maul kills Pre Vizsla. And that's how he gets a Darksaber. Maul takes a Darksaber to Dathomir. Sabine finds it in Dathomir, tries to bring it back to Mandalore, and her mom is like, did you win it in combat? Sabine's like, no. And Ursa Wren's like, well, that's worthless then.
Right.
And then eventually she does have to fight Gar Saxon, which is kind of like winning it. It's either Gar Saxon. Yeah, it's Gar Saxon. She has.
But wait, how does Gar Saxon have control of it when Maul is still alive?
Well, he challenges Sabine for it, and Maul lost it. It gets weird and complicated. But the short version is
Maul loses it because Palpatine, right?
No, Maul has it. It's on Dathomir is where they find it. He gets it back somehow.
That
is a good question though. Yeah, because Palpatine. We don't have time to get into all.
I know the complexities of the Darksaber.
All this leads to say that Sabine just hands the Darksaber to Bo-Katan and says, "Look, I'm not going to be a good leader. You do it."
And I didn't realize that when I first watched the end of season 2 of Mandalorian, and rewatching the end of season 2 of Mandalorian to brush up on my memory of what actually happened, because I have a memory of a goldfish. Seeing her refuse it when Din Djarin offers it to her, now I understand why. She stiffens up and goes, I can't take it from you. Everybody following me is following me because they want me to win it in combat and do it the way that you're supposed to, because again, she's leaning on some fundamentalist.
She's even leaning on it a little bit, or their interpretation of it. Again, I really want to talk about lines that happen later in the season, but I'm going to be vague.
That's fine.
Different groups of the Mandalorians put different weights on the Darksaber as an aspect of the fundamentals of their culture. And I do want to say, when we say the word fundamentalism, it is a neutral term. We're not using it in the sense of fundamentalist Christianity. Those splinter groups that are like, kill all of the people that are not cis white people. Because Jesus said so, which is a weird interpretation of it. But we're speaking as a perfectly neutral term.
Yeah,
to say a group that is trying to go back. Different groups of Mandalorians have different interpretation of what the fundamentals of their culture and religion, which are kind of meshed in the same thing, are. So it's interesting to see, particularly in the character of Bo-Katan, where she's going to go this season, how she's reconciling those different interpretations of the fundamentals of their religion and their culture together.
I think she's definitely leaning on it as I am aware that this is more or less a myth, but this is important to make people believe in me.
Well, we have to move on from that, but thank you for that interesting bit of history. And I know you just like to come on the podcast and talk about weird religions.
This is what I do in my downtime. I'm so sorry.
This is what
Bradley.
she does in her downtime.
I'm so sorry, Bradley.
This is the way. Aaron just pulled a horrified face.
That was my major tangent for this episode. I think I'm mostly done after that.
My religion is that the flamethrower is useless. And in the fight with the gator turtle thing, the flamethrower is useless. It does nothing.
While watching,
you try to hit it with the flamethrower and it does nothing.
Flamethrower count number 1.
Flamethrower is useless, count number 1.
Every time I see them use the flamethrower, and I might have said this before, all I can think of is Spaceballs the flamethrower. And I think that's the primary reason why I've never been able to take it seriously.
I've never been able to take it seriously because it is a useless and ineffective weapon that only is good for one specific thing, which is lighting flammable things on fire. And we have also seen that even in real life, anti-infantry flamethrower weaponry is completely fucking useless.
Yeah, it's maybe good, like a kind of the equivalent of a taser. Like you can use it to shock something, but I don't think it's going to work through the hard shell of a gator, and it
An
doesn't.
aquatic animal.
An
An
aquatic
animal that is
animal,
presently
sure,
covered in water. Like, what are
Right.
you gonna
and
do?
has a shell.
You can use it to kind of scare a thing, but the thing
Right.
does actually have to be like more than momentarily inconvenienced, and you have
You
to have
need
a
a
part two.
you need a fireball big enough to be the equivalent of the flamethrower to a normal sized person. Like, I don't know, a ship shooting a torpedo at it, for
Yes,
example.
ship shooting a torpedo at it, just like in the Phantom Menace.
Oh, I was
Yes,
just trying to segue into,
the Naboo. You did an excellent job. The Naboo starfighter comes in. Bradley, I wanted to ask you: did you have the same moment I did when they fire the thing from underneath it? Of, oh, that's just like in the Phantom Menace.
You know what's funny is I didn't make the connection.
Oh, that's the same. Probably because I had a Naboo starfighter toy as a kid, and that's where the firing port. It had one of those spring-loaded torpedoes in it that you could fire.
Oh, okay.
That we really probably shouldn't have been giving to children in the 2000s.
Nev.
Or the 1999 when I got this, but we did, and we're still doing it. Lego is all spring loaded. Like, I'm looking at a spring loaded Bastille from season 2.
I've just been thinking Navu Starfighter.
Now I'm imagining Joseph Smith in a Naboo starfighter flying around between different states because he keeps getting chased out of them.
Oh, him put himself in a combat role willingly?
Oh God, no. No, he wouldn't.
Anything that's not just arm wrestling?
In the armorer's cave, Din asks her how he can redeem himself in the way. She informs him that the only way is to bathe into the waters on Mandalore. The planet is not habitable, so that's not an option. Din offers proof that someone may have been to the surface. Din seeks to redeem himself by traveling to Mandalore and bathing in the waters himself. The armorer accepts his quest.
To Aaron's point earlier, as far as like the armorer maybe not necessarily wanting them to retake Mandalore because she has more power when they're in exile, I do find it interesting that Din comes back after like 2 years of being exiled from the covert, and literally the first thing she says is, "You took your helmet off."
Yeah. And also, passage of time wasn't as clear to me.
It's not clear to anyone. We only know it's like about that length of time because Jon Favreau said, and I like how it's clear from visual cues in the episode that time has passed, but it's really confusing until you get to Navarro. Once you get to Navarro, you're like, oh, okay, some significant time has passed.
That makes sense, because I was like, holy shit, Navarro's popping off, man.
It's been several years since the events of season 2.
I feel so dumb.
You're not dumb. It's bad writing in the episode. But she literally starts off by just lecturing him about how dumb he is to come back.
Knowing that 2 years have passed, make him showing up with the inscription makes so much more sense, because my primary note for that is, where did you get that? When did this happen? And he says Jawas, but I'm like, when did you, how long has this been?
A significant period of time.
And the other note I have is that, again, I was watching this with my father, and he studied geology. He's a geologist, and he interjected during the episode with, "Oh yeah, that's the same stuff that showed up in New Mexico after the Trinity nuclear testing." I'm like, so what now? And the crystallization they're referring to is indeed the heat crystallization of sand after, you heat it up with bombs, for example. But also there is, and I looked at this up on the Wikipedia, and they mentioned trinitite by name as one of the crystals that's embedded into this inscription. Trinitite is a quasicrystal that is formed by nuclear fission or fusion. I'm not.
I'm a doctor, not a physicist.
I'm a historian, not a physicist. But the fact that trinitite is there, he says something along the lines of, maybe the surface isn't poisoned. If that's there, that it is poisoned, but it is poisoned, unfortunately. You can probably go there, but it is poison, because this stuff, it only appears in our real world when there's been some nuclear.
We saw in Book of Boba Fett that the Night of the Thousand Tears, they did use
Yes.
nuclear weaponry to destroy Sundari.
A lot of them.
They used a lot of nuclear weaponry. And a clarifying point we will find out later in the season, the Night of a Thousand Tears, which is the bombing that we see in Book of Boba Fett, and the Great Purge of Mandalore, the way they essentially wiped all life from the planet, these are two different events. The Night of a Thousand Tears comes first.
Oh.
So they drop a bunch of bombs, and then some stuff happens, and then they purge the planet.
Din heads off to Navarro to meet up with his old pal, the now High Magistrate Grief Karga. In the time since we last visited, Navarro has thrived under his leadership. Karga offers him a job as a marshal, but he declines. They are interrupted as Grief seems to have a pirate problem in town, and the pair confront the pirates and scare them off.
Love seeing Purrgil. Other than that, I feel like Aeron said literally everything that needs to be said about the Purrgil scene up at the top of the episode.
Yeah, with the little, like, it
Oh,
was a cute
Space
scene.
Whale.
I mean, yeah.
Right. I keep forgetting that Aeron hasn't watched Star Wars a
Oh.
lot outside of this. Yeah, those space whales are called. Here's my thing I will now tell you. Firstly, you should watch Rebels. It's really good. Those space whales that Grogu sees are called Purrgil. They are hyperspace capable space whales. Actually have the capacity to launch themselves into hyperspace. In fact, it is theorized that them traveling through hyperspace may be how some of the earliest civilizations learned how to do this, how to travel through hyperspace. They are crucially important to the plot of Rebels, as well as to the disappearance of one Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Okay, that sounds suitably interesting enough to draw my attention.
Yes, they're very weird little space whales.
I love that. I love that so much.
We hop over to Navarro, which has grown a lot, and we see some fucking aliens. And there's little salacious crumbs up in the Kowakian monkey lizards is what they are called. I don't even have to look that up. I just know that these are Kowakian monkey lizards. Best known as a salacious bee crumb, which is a character from Return of the Jedi.
My note from arriving at Le Port de Navarro, gem of the Outer Rim, is Baby Yoda sees the food roasting for sale, and he thinks, I want to eat that. He sees the food being chopped up, and he thinks, I want to eat that. He sees the bat parrot on that guy's shoulder who walks by, the little bat dragon parrot, dragonling thing on the guy's shoulder, and he thinks, I could eat that. And then he sees the weird monkeys, as it's in my notes. Lizard monkeys, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Kowakian monkey lizards.
Kowakian monkey lizards. He looks at that and he thinks they are bigger than him. But it's all shot from his perspective, looking around, and that is my interpretation of his internal monologue. And then that's all I got before they get to Grief Karga's office. We see that time has passed because he's got a beard.
We also see that Grief Karga has now droid. His train has grown so much that he has droids to carry his train around.
That is High Magistrate Karga to you.
That is High Magistrate Grief Karga.
I do love the self-imposed title, by the way. Like, I don't think he wasn't democratically elected or anything.
Okay, on the Old West comparisons front, that happened all the time. You could just declare yourself a magistrate. And usually it started off by some guy who just built a saloon, and a town popped up nearby a railway, and town pops up around it. Guy who runs the saloon, everybody knows that guy, so he's in charge, essentially.
Because he's also the guy that ran the bar in he was operating out of the bar in season 1.
This is what I'm talking about. It all track. This happened in a couple ways. You see it first happen as the Oregon Trail westward are being founded. Okay, you're on your way west. You gotta stop eventually. Here's where you can stop. For example, Independence, Missouri. It starts off as just the last place you go before you leave what's known as civilization. And good luck, guys. Have fun. Don't get dysentery. And every time we invent a new mode of transportation, the things shift. So when the railway, the cross-continental railways are built, towns pop up on those rail lines that when cars and roads for cars are developed, a lot of those railway towns, they just fade away. A lot of those ghost towns are just old railway towns.
That is very interesting that you talk about towns springing up along a traveling route, because Grief does mention that they're on the Hydean Way.
Yep.
The Hydean Way is a super hyper route. It runs from the core world to the outer rim. It is one of the biggest hyperspace routes. It is mentioned a few times, especially during the Clone Wars, as being something, the Hydian Way being this route that they need to control. So it is actually a very important trade route. Control of the Hydian Way, you could do a lot of damage if you are messing with stuff on the Hydian Way. So it actually is this major trade route, and Grief mentions that trade coming in from the Hydian Way to Navarro has bolstered it a great deal.
A similar thing happens with shipping ports. There's a lot of port cities that exist just because if you're making the route, say, through the Suez, you'll eventually stop through various cities on the way, or if you're making the route around the Horn of Africa, bottom of Africa, you're going to stop on the way here because you need to refuel eventually. It is the gas station. If you've ever traveled for a long time on the highway and eventually need to stop for gas, and there's a small town there with a gas station, that's what we're talking about, I think.
The Belters is apparently a reference to something.
Sounds like The Expanse.
I think it's The Expanse. I've not seen The Expanse, but I've told that The Expanse is very good.
It is. And the people who mine asteroids and spend most of their time living basically either hopping from asteroid to asteroid or off port on their own ship, not on say a spaceport or a moon. They're often called belters, and sometimes that's expanded to include the people who live just outside of either Earth or Mars. The belters, the people who live out, on the outskirts of the frontier, essentially. That one threw me. I was like, Belter?
I believe some people mentioned it was an Expanse reference.
That makes sense.
We are introduced to the Navarro Copper droids. It is the droid that is speaking to Grief Karga in his office. We're not going to go through everybody who's in every suit and voicing everything because we would be here all day. I did want to point out the Navarro Copper droid is being voiced by Parvesh Cheena. Parvesh Cheena, big comedy actor, been in History of the World Part 2, as well as quite a few other shows. I'm scrolling down here. He's got 180 acting credits. He's been in the Bob's Burgers movie. Nothing else that I recognize. He's a pet shop owner in Lady and the Tramp. Let's see if he has a Marvel. I couldn't find one, but I did find he was in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. Have you watched Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Bradley?
I've never seen it.
You desperately have to see this show. It's so fucking funny.
That's a CW show though, right?
I believe so, but I promise you, it's not any.
I only have so much capacity for CW shows in my brain.
It's not like any other CW show.
I know. I'm just
kidding. The network.
It's in the same vein as Ugly Betty and was it Jane the Virgin or whatever? I know it's in that same vein. I think it's the same creator.
So fucking good.
One thing, it is a musical.
It is a musical.
Kind of.
It's weird. The person in the Copper Droid suit is a performer by the name of Chris Bartlett. Chris Bartlett is notable because he does a lot of droid. He is particularly notable. He's been a guy in a suit for C-3PO for about 20 years. He was in his first acting credit was Pitching Lucas in 2006, where he portrays C-3PO. He's also the droid server and the traffic protocol droid in Book of Boba Fett. And in Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's the guy inside the suit of One Jack, the Forlom-looking motherfucker on Dayu, not Daro. Daro's the planet from Bad Batch. But I wanted to shout him out because this is what he does. Most of his acting credits are being in a droid suit. Speaking of people who are in this show, Vane, the pirate who is menacing everyone, is being played by a gentleman named Marty Matulis. I apologize for the mispronunciation of the last name. It appears, looking at his list of credits, that being a guy and emoting in a suit is sort of a thing that he does. A lot of his photos on IMDb are him in some sort of prosthetic suit or some sort of heavy makeup. In addition to being in The Mandalorian, he is in Evil. He is in Star Trek Picard as a couple of different roles. And he's in the show that one of these days I will will convince Bradley to do a rewatch podcast for. He is in Teen Wolf as the surgeon, the outlaw, and a Nukite. I don't know what any of these words mean because I never made it that far.
It's just funny because I know you're saying it wrong, but I don't want to correct you because if we end up ever doing it, it'll be funny because you're going to hear it. You're going to hear
one of
the
these days we will.
of it, and you're going to be like,
I'm going to be like, God damn it, I screwed up the episode. Yeah, this is just kind of what he does.
We didn't really know at this time how significant this character was supposed to be until, not in relation to The Mandalorian, but in relation to some other things later on.
It hits weird because, like, we now know this guy's going to be important, which I didn't think when I first watched it.
The most stubborn, I want to drink here.
And it's like,
it's a school now. There's no alcohol in it. Then bring me a drink here. the absolute.
The guy's like, I'm just going to walk into this school with all of my pirate buddies.
It's a very Karen move.
Which is the worst. I hate this character. And I desperately want to see him die a horrible death.
Okay. It was a funny scene for me because the whole time I'm saying out loud, there's no alcohol. If you go back to his office, there might be alcohol there if you want alcohol. And he's just being personal.
He's being a dick.
Yeah. And we get to see Grief Karga like do a quick draw.
He does a quick draw.
He's still got it.
He still got it.
That's how you stay in charge.
My real last note for this sequence, including the bit where Grief is like, hey, I need a marshal, is lol, bye, Cara Dune.
They did a good job.
Yeah, they really were like, hey, you know that thing that we were going to do in the first season? Well, guess what? This is how we fix that problem. Mando, would you like to do this thing?
It's very we're writing her off the show. And that's the nice thing about the show not being super planned out, is that they can just kind of do that. And we'll see later on other characters take on the role that I theorize would have been Cara Dune, had the actress playing Cara Dune not turned out to be just the absolute worst.
I did note that. Okay. We're explaining why she's no longer here. Cool. And if someone gets recruited by special forces, you're not going to hear from them again for a while. They can't talk about what they're up to.
Of course, yeah. You'll never hear from them again. Yeah,
I'm sure in like 20 years or something, when it's not so fresh anymore, somebody will do like a book or a comic or something about what happened to Cara Dune after the events of this show. But we're not at that point yet, and we can't do that.
Booker comic would be perfect because new live action act.
Somebody will do a Cara Dune book, and there we go.
After dealing with the pirates, Din reveals that he needs a droid. Not just any droid, he wants IG-11 revived. Din successfully revives the droid, only for it to revert back to its original directive and attacks Grogu. After stopping it, Grief suggests the local Anzellans can fix the droid for him. The Anzellans agree, but say Din must find a new memory core first.
Babu Fik! Yeah, the statue was in season 2 as a background detail, and now they have decided to make it a plot point.
I have no memory of that.
It's blink and you miss it. They don't call any attention to it, but in a shot where Grief and Grogu and Mando are entering the school, you can see the statue of IG-11 in the background.
When they do the flashback or the intro, the previously happened on The Mandalorian, when they show IG-11, I remember thinking to myself, we're going back to IG-11. This is why we're going back to IG-11.
Yes, that is Taika Waititi again as the voice of IG-11. Taika Waititi, very busy writing his own Star Wars movie.
I also love this reoccurring thread of like IG-11 never dies. Like we always keep bringing him back for no reason whatsoever. Like it's like, why don't you just permanently bring him back? It's so annoying to me when they do this thing of like, okay, he dies. No, just kidding. We brought him back as a nurse. Nope, he dies. Now we're going to try to bring him back as a bodyguard. Like it's not working for me. Like just bring him back.
Oh, if you've ever recovered like a broken down computer, like its memory before and rebuilt it, they are all, eventually you have this ship of Theseus where it's a combination of like the left of one version of the hard drive and the cloud backup that you had. And it's no longer in the original computer and none of the parts are the same, but it works for a droid.
I also love the quippy one-liner that Din does, the using your head. That's using your head. bad when they drop the grief carga head on.
Very
That's so
true.
bad.
So bad.
I do want to say, not for Aeron, but for a future episode, specifically episode 6, put a pin in Din does not necessarily trust Aldroid. He trusts this one. Put a pin in that. Come back to that. Because we have a more important scene to talk about, and that scene is the Babu Fricks. All the little Babu Fricks.
This scene was definitely for those who did not like the sequel trilogy. This was just for you. They did this on purpose, and they brought not one but 3 Anzellans in this scene now.
Shout out this season as a whole, and again we'll get to it particularly when we get to episode 7. This season really did say, no, we are tying into the sequel trilogy. That is happening.
Yeah,
They
do exist, and they are very important. So here you go. More
so
lore.
we're going to tie into them. Would you like to know, Bradley, who's voicing the Anzellan?
Yes, because you turned me on to this, and I didn't think twice about the Anzellans.
You didn't
nor
even
did I
note
ever.
it.
I didn't even know in my notes, nor did I even know back when I watched Rise of Skywalker, did it even occur to me that the voice of Babu Frick would be something interesting. And this is all the same person. And so please enlighten us.
Yeah, so whenever I go through and I'm highlighting who we want to spotlight, because these episodes are very long, and particularly when we have a guest, they continue to be even more long. You are the 3rd longest guest that we have.
Yes.
You have been beaten twice in terms of sheer runtime of the episode. So we can't obviously talk about everybody. All of these people are fantastic, and it's worth going to the IMDb page for the episode and looking at their credits. It's just specifically we have to sort of decide which ones we are going to talk about. This one, I absolutely 100% wanted to talk about. Because yes, the Anzellans are being voiced by Shirley Henderson. Shirley Henderson is best known to Star Wars fans as the voice of Babu Frick. But all millennials will know Shirley Henderson from that horrible Turf Woman's movies. She plays Moaning Myrtle in the Harry Potter series.
So great.
She's in Doctor
Fuck
Who as
Joanne Rowling, by the way. She sucks.
That's true. The actress also appears in a very good episode of Doctor Who.
I was literally about to say that she's Ursula Blake, who I do think, she's in Love and Monsters, which is I think the episode.
Oh, it's a weird one.
Is it the one where she's the one that gets turned into like a slab of cement?
Mm-hmm.
And they make an awful joke. So Doctor Who does this weird thing when it, at least during the Russell T Davies era, where it would like have an episode or two that they kind of could film simultaneously with other episodes that they didn't necessarily need the Doctor and the companion for because they'd only show up in like 1 or 2 scenes.
A lower deck kind of.
A lower decks, yeah, it's a lower decks episode. Doctor Who would always have 1 per season, and this was that episode where the Doctor and Rose Tyler are barely in it.
They show up at the end.
Yeah, that is who is voicing the Anzellans in this episode.
They're
which
so
I thought
fun.
was
They're
whole
so
scene
fun.
is
I just like
peak camp.
I just like, I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off. Okay. The bit where they look down at the little door in the wall and you see the Anzellans leaning out like, go talk to them. He looks at the wall and he looks down and they're coming out of the wall and the little door. It reminded me the bit in near the beginning of the movie Labyrinth where she meets the worm in the little door in the wall of the labyrinth and the worm is like, oh, come inside, have a cup of tea. No, you don't want to go to the castle. Oh, me, I'm just a worm. It's the same little door type thing. It's high camp.
It is high camp. Everything about this scene is just high camp. And I have in my notes specifically, bad baby. Bad baby.
It's broke.
They're so cute. And well, of course, we knew that like Grogu with Anzellans was going to be cute as fuck anyway, but how did they make it even funnier and campier and cuter than we could have expected because it was adorable?
I think it works for me because it's Din sitting there, because Din is the
How
most...
There has to be a backup door because he could not have fit in that.
You know what this makes me think of is like, if you've ever seen How the Grinch Stole Christmas, like the live action version, there's this random scene in the movie where the Grinch stops a little mini car with little mini who's in it, and it's like the thought is like, why are there little mini versions of people in this world and little mini cars, and like, so it doesn't make any sense in the terms of like the world building, but like it's just funny because practicality is like, these are obviously smaller aliens or like little people aliens, like, so why would they go out of their way to make a giant ass house for themselves? It's like, no, we just have a little house because we're little people.
They're like
D&D
under
size class, extra small.
They're like underneath another building, but like, yeah, it's the fact that Din. So the thing about Din is that Din Djarin, like, really honestly, like, does not know he's in a Star Wars. So everything he's in, he's taking completely at face value. He's just like, yep, I'm gonna sit here and look at
Sorry, what
the
did you
end
say?
villains.
Well, and then that's what I like about.
Trying to so serious.
I
Like sitting
love the
cross-legged
tease
on the
because
floor in a crawl space.
No,
Well, I love I
Brock.
love the juxtaposition of this with Andor because like you can go from a show like Andor where it's very serious and very political and stuff, and then you jump into this super high camp of Star Wars, and you have to remember like, yeah, Star Wars is also about this ridiculousness of just this very serious character in this very crazy situation.
All right, we got the Muppet Babies version over here. Got it.
One thing I love about Star Wars is that a lot of different stories can exist in the same universe. That you can have a very serious political drama, you can have a very serious character study like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then you can have it broke. It broke. No fix.
So funny. And Aaron, this is just a tease for you because if you thought Muppets were camp, just wait. We're not even at the campiest episode of this season yet. And it is
my God.
Fantastic.
Oh my God. Oh
like it is
my God.
ultra high camp to the fullest extent Star Wars has ever gone. And you're gonna be like, okay, Mandalorian, I see what you're doing.
This shit looked at fucking Phantom Menace and was like, we can go campier than this.
As Din leaves Navarro, the pirate crew led by Vane's superior, Gorian Shard, attacks his ship, but Din successfully escapes the pirates, taking out a few of them in the process.
It's a very fun scene. It's very Attack of the Clones in the asteroid field. I'm sure Bradley approved of that.
No, I definitely liked it. Yeah, it gave me, it was just good vibes. I love the idea of pirates in space. I was like, wow, I'm surprised they haven't really leaned into this before as much, and I really liked it. I almost was getting like, where's Hondo Ohnaka in all of this? Like, he needs to show up because I love this whole pirates in space thing.
Hondo Ohnaka is not a pirate. Hondo Ohnaka is a legitimate businessman. Everything Hondo Ohnaka does is above board.
If you're a privateer, then absolutely. The pirates excited me because I have been listening episode by episode to a really great podcast where, space pirates feature as enemy prominently for a bit, and they're like a representative of what seems to be the big bad, and I'm really enjoying this particular Star Wars podcast.
What podcast is it here?
It's called For Light and Dice.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's good.
I've never heard of it.
I've
Sounds
heard
like
of that
a fake
one.
podcast.
You might check it out if you get some downtime. It's fun.
I've heard it's pretty good. Yes, Aaron.
Speaking of camp, For Light and Dice.
No, it really is. Like, For Light and Dice is there's bumper stickers on the Gonk droid, and it's ridiculous. Gonk.
Every so often, I restrain myself from leaving a review for the podcast that's just Gonk.
For Light and Dice being, of course, the High Republic era TTRPG podcast that I am on as a cast member, voicing Wen, who's named after a Dragon Age character, who could not be more different than the Dragon Age character they are named after. Getting good reviews from people who have not even barely seen I think Jordan has seen maybe one Star Wars.
She's seen some Star Wars. I've made her watch.
She's seen some Star Wars. Even she enjoys Light and Dice, so you can check out Light and Dice even if you're not a big Star Wars fan.
If you like D&D especially, played D&D 5th edition, if you listened to Critical Role or The Adventure Zone, that's all you need to know. I don't know much about Star Wars, the High Republic era, really, and it explains everything. It's great. And it's a really great explainer for how D&D 5th edition works too, if you've never played D&D.
Well, I'm sure we will eventually have a fight in an asteroid field, but I do think like 2 episodes ago we did have a fight in an asteroid field.
Yes, you did.
We did.
But yeah, Space Pirate. He rolls in like a vast matey.
Yeah, and he has this big ship that looks like... I gasped when I saw the ship, because it looks so much like the Eclipse from Legends. The Superstar Destroyer Eclipse, which was a... Legends had this bad habit of like, for a while there in the 80s and 90s, all the supplemental, particularly the 90s, the supplemental material would be like, what if we made the thing bigger? So the Eclipse was what if the Executor, but bigger?
Checks out for
That's Star
ships in the
Wars.
real world.
Yep. Pause. Let's talk about Gorian Shard.
Yeah, the most interesting character to so far come out of this episode.
Love this
for
man's
me
design.
at least. The character design, yeah, is insane.
Got seaweed face.
Seaweed face. God, I fucking love him. He's so interesting. Like, it's very Star Wars, like, camp. Like,
Fun.
perfect. And it's exactly like if you think space pirate, that's exactly what you think of. Let's talk about who's voicing him and who's in the suit.
Right.
Because they're two different people. Gorian Shard, who I keep wanting to call Gorian Shand, because they look exactly the same. R and N look basically like the same letter. Gorian Shard is voiced by Nonzo Anozi, is the gentleman's name. If you Google this man, you will recognize him from something. In The Sandman, he's the voice of Wyvern. In Artemis Fowl, the terrible movie, he's Demovie Butler.
What movie?
Exactly.
That's the point.
Go on.
He's Demovie Butler. In Doctor Who, he's the voice of Hydroflax. I know him in particular from two specific shows. In Game of Thrones, in season 2, he's Zaro Zoandoxis, who's the Carthian merchant that takes in Daenerys. Dies in the show, still alive in the books, waging war on Meereen. But he is that guy. But I also recognize him from the 2013 Dracula show, plays Renfield. And if you're thinking, how does that make sense? It doesn't. The character is completely different in the show than he is in every other adaptation. Yes, I am perpetually being haunted by the 2013 Dracula show. The third worst Dracula adaptation in my mind. Only behind Hot Take, and I'm sure they'll fight me about this eventually, Bram Stoker's Dracula at number 2, and then Netflix's, BBC's, Mark Gatiss' Stephen Moffat's Dracula, which premiered back in 2019 and is some of the worst garbage I've ever laid my eyes on in my life. Anyway, that's who's...
One day I'll ask you for like the full top 10.
One day, I've always wanted to do something where I get to talk in detail about how much I hate Bram Stoker's Dracula and why I hate it so much. But
you could just, I don't want to dwell on Dracula too much, but you could just start a podcast where every season is about a different Dracula thing, and you just break down the whole thing why it's either awful or good.
If I ever get enough time in my life, one of the things I do want to launch would be some sort of Dracula content. However, we don't have time.
Will this come before or after the Elizabeth Bathory series?
It would come after, because that's my highest priority. And one day I do want to do something with all the ridiculous amount of knowledge I have on Elizabeth Bathory. Let's talk about who's in the suit. The gentleman in the suit, the minute I say this name, I'm sure Bradley will probably recognize him. Carrie Jones. Bradley is giving me you need to prompt me into this look. You've seen Carrie Jones before in the Book of Boba Fett. He's Black Chrysanthemum.
Okay. Now it makes sense. I was like,
yes.
It took me a second to get there, but I was like, okay.
In the Book of Boba Fett, he is Black Chrysanthemum. He is a big, like, makeup guy, special effects makeup, performance guy, prosthetic makeup. I will say he was the supervisor for the KNB EFX group in Werewolf by Night, so I'm not sure if we want to... Let me look and see if he's done a Disney thing. Was Santa Claus... Was Santa Claus's Disney?
I thought you were going to say Chryssanta Claus. Black Santa Claus. The Santa Claus is Disney, yes. Like Claus, like that Tim Allen Santa Claus.
The comedy series, Santa Claus. Yeah, so Carrie Jones actually does have a Disney trifecta if you include his role as a crew member. Which I'll give it to him. I'll give it to him on a technicality.
It's a technicality, yeah.
He has at least been involved.
Okay.
Yeah, he has at least been involved. Oh no, he's in Werewolf by Night. He's Ted.
Okay.
And then let me see if he's been in. It doesn't look like he's been in a Disney thing, but I am going to give him... I'm gonna give him a sort of honorary Disney trifecta just for his work.
Okay, well,
he's also in Teen Wolf.
Eye on him.
He's also in Teen Wolf.
I see that. He's in the first season. Yeah,
the alpha werewolf in the season I did watch, although I remember basically nothing about it. And we do get a Dank Ferret.
Dank Ferret count 1.
Dank Ferret count goes up by 1. I forget what our count.
I like how we're not going to keep track of any of these counts, but we're like, oh, there's another one. Oh, so for those of you at home who want to keep track,
we say that Dark Side Divas and Marvelous Divas you is one of their listeners actually does keep a spreadsheet.
I would love for someone to start like a Wikipedia for our podcast and just keep track of all the stupid shit that we keep trackers for. That would be great. So if somebody out there wants to spend their time
keep track of
and do that, I would love it. I would be so grateful if you did that. But I personally will never keep track because I don't care that much. But it's also hilarious.
We're just making this up as we go along.
Let's say it resets for the season. We have one for the season.
Dank Ferret counter is at 1 for the season.
And finally, Din and Grogu exit hyperspace to the Mandalorian system, where they head to Kree's castle. They meet with Bo-Katan, who reveals she has given up her plans to reclaim Mandalore. She tells Din he's wasting his time trying to go to the planet's surface, tells him how to get there anyways.
The planet that they go to is called Kalevala. It is a planet in the Mandalorian system. It is namely the home of Clan Kryze, which means it is the homeworld of Duchess Satine Kryze, as well as most likely Bo-Katan. Although I think Bo-Katan would claim Mandalore as her homeworld. This is the seat of power for Clan Kryze, is on Kalevala. It's our first time ever seeing it, but Kalevala has been mentioned a great deal in the Clone Wars as being where Satine is from. It is also where I theorize that Satine and Obi-Wan's secret child, Corky Kryze, was raised before being passed off as Satine's nephew. But I am going to continue to have that tinfoil hat on my head until the day I die.
I was going to say, Charles, put a pin, Corky Kryze, for now.
Oh, I know where this is going in several episodes. I have the same theory, but...
Do you? Okay, I can't wait till we get there.
Or I have a similar theory, I think, to what you have.
Okay.
Yes, so Aaron, that is some information about the planet of Kalevala, where they currently are. And that is, in fact, Castle Kryze, or a castle. It's never explicitly identified, I think, as the direct seat of power, but we can assume by the fact there is a throne there, we can assume it is probably the seat of power. You can put a throne anywhere. You
sure as shit can. But you can't necessarily pose like that on a throne just anywhere.
No, you really need more of a chaise lounge for that situation. As she's introduced, it's a very cool introduction, but all I could think was like, that can't be comfortable lounging like that in the armor. How long has she been sitting like that? Did she set that up as he came in? Like she
clearly set that up when he came in.
I have a great TikTok that I'll send you guys. It's so funny. I feel like maybe I sent it to you, Charles, but there's a hilarious TikTok of this girl who she's pretending to be Bo-Katan, and then like you see Mando flying in, and she looks up and she goes, "Oh shit!" and then she like runs real quick to like her throne room and like tries to pose. It's so fucking funny.
I would love to see that.
I 100% believe that she's just like she's just like hanging around like making breakfast or something, and the droid's like, "The Mandalorian is here," and she's like, "Shit. Let me lounge upon the throne in a position of relaxation." I love it.
When you're setting up the Zoom call before you turn the video on, try to look like,
yeah, you just kind of have to like pose. Been here the whole time, just like this.
It's whenever I have to like, whenever I record for Light and Dice or I go on a live show or something, I always have to like spend several minutes adjusting my camera. It's like, do I want the Obi-Wan poster in the background? Do I want the High Republic poster in the background? Do I want to like angle the thing in such a way so it sees my collection of books, or do we want more of a blank wall thing? What's going on here? Bradley, of course, doesn't have this problem because he's already set his thing up to have all of the fucking Funko Pops forever behind him.
They've grown since I last saw them.
He's added action figures.
I know. I'm getting really creative with my design process. However, I feel like I just need to buy a house for this. I agree. Apartment lifestyle does not work for me anymore with all my shit.
I'm actually coming into some mild conflict because I keep taking shelves from people who are moving, and we're running out of shelves in the apartment. You have to stop getting shelves. Where are you going to put all of these shelves? Let's talk for a minute about Bo-Katan, specifically where she's at, because she tried to unite her people, and then when she showed up without the Darksaber, her people sort of disappeared. So now she is this leader in exile, and I was thinking throughout history of instances where you have someone who is claiming to be a leader in exile. Particularly, my thought immediately went to Charles de Gaulle during World War II.
Yes.
But I asked Aaron to see if specifically we had some examples from history of things that are similar to where Bo-Katan is at this point in the episode.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of the examples in history are examples of say your land has been snatched by someone else and there's a government there ruling. She's in the situation of our people are scattered to the winds, and so Mandalore now exists as a people, but they only exist. I'm only a ruler if those people agree that I'm the ruler. And that's true that if you're a government in exile as well. But in this case, there's no homeland, for example, to go back, fortunately. At least that's the way she
Or at least they think she thinks it's poisoned. The children of the Watch think it's cursed.
For her, I think it's always been, I want to consolidate power over the people. Governments in exile. You're only a pretender to the throne or a government in exile as long as people agree that you have any reason to be ruling. For example, there's a real fun thing is to look up people who are descendants of royal houses today. Who they are no longer royalty. They no longer have that like a claim to any throne. Like there's still Romanovs alive today. Like descendants of the cousins of the main group, and they got out of Dodge and they went to like France and America and Canada.
There are no immediate members of the Tsar's family alive, unfortunately. No. Sorry to ruin Anastasia for you. She definitely got murdered.
We have evidence.
We have evidence.
No, she fell in love and she danced magically, and then there was this wizard guy for some reason, and then a talking bat for some reason, and that's how I know that history. Don't change history. Charles.
It's me, Anastasia.
I'm just like, everything about that movie is completely wrong historically.
So fun.
I don't know. I think that's pretty much all I know about the history of that part of the world is from that movie.
Tsar Nicholas II did not get overthrown because he cast Rasputin out. It was quite the opposite, actually. He probably should have kicked Rasputin out to the curb.
One day Charles will have his Elizabeth Bathory podcast, and one day I will have my Rasputin podcast, where we just like a breakdown of all right, so we've got a historical boogeyman. Let's break this down. So we've got a drunk guy from the countryside. But yeah, there's no Romanovs from that direct line alive today. The Soviets, we finally have some, evidence from the former Soviet government. That,
we did find out. Yeah, I think post that movie coming out, I think we did find out. Yes, they did actually murder the entire family. Anastasia did not escape.
We've got bones, sadly.
We do have a body. And as we know from Star Wars, if you do see the body, they are not coming back.
This is what I've learned from Star Wars.
I think it's interesting, too, that, you can look at there's people who will claim, because part of Bo-Katan's whole thing is that she's sort of claiming to be from a royal family, that she's sort of claiming to be, which we know is also kind of true. Satine and the new Mandalorians did have to fight a civil war.
Which happens all the time.
So she is sort of fudging the truth a little bit.
It's that she would have a claim to the throne.
It's that she would have a claim to it through her family who sat on the throne.
An example might be, what might be a good example is, say, I think it's the War of the Roses. The differing families that all have like a claim to the throne that fight over who gets it.
Or the whole kerfuffle surrounding the invasion of England. So the Norman Conquest is like the end of 3 different factions vying for power. Like the Vikings invade first to try to take power, and part of the whole reason William wins is because
fighting each other, and then
they're fighting each other, and
Normandy,
William is like a bastard who barely has any claim to the throne, but then he shows up with bigger army diplomacy and proceeds to it's interesting to look at the way Bo-Katan talks about her claim to the throne, and again, you'll be interested to see where this season goes in terms of her sort of tenuous, because she really doesn't believe in the mythology. She's more using it, which is interesting because she's sitting in a room adorned with murals of mythological battles.
True. Well, she inherited that castle, I assume.
She did inherit that castle. She also seems to believe, she directly calls the Children of the Watch a cult.
Yes.
This will become complicated later on in the season. Her attitude now of it is a splinter cult. We'll come back
she talks about the factions that fractured their people and led to the Civil War that was the eventual downfall. And She doesn't seem to believe in the myth around this, but she definitely understands the power of the people below her believing in the myth.
Right, which is why when she didn't show up with the Darksaber, it was like...
It did not work, exactly.
It did not work. She was relying on that to unite that particular group of people and keep control of her fleet, which you see has now gone. Yep. There is no more fleet for now. They're running around throughout the galaxy with it.
For example, if nobody thinks that the monarch should be restored to the throne, case of, say, the French monarchy, for example, after the French Revolution. If nobody thinks that there is a divine right to this group, the House of Bourbon, I think it is, being on the throne, then no one's going to work to do it.
And I think they reinstall post the French Revolution goes on for a long time, but post Robespierre, they do briefly install a monarchy again. And basically nobody likes this guy. So when Napoleon comes out of exile, everybody's like, oh, a guy we actually like. And then Napoleon declares himself he declares himself emperor before, I think.
Yeah. I think
he declares himself emperor first, and then they put another guy in charge. But everybody's like, we kind of want Napoleon, actually.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a reason nobody liked having the monarchy in place. One of the things going on during the Napoleonic Wars was, okay, if you can overthrow your divine ruler, your ruler who has a divine right to the throne because God says so, then all the other countries around you, they have kings who are in power because they say God said so, and throws everybody into question. So you end up with people having to back you up.
And you also have the idea too of in China, the mandate of heaven, the idea of the cyclical dynasties is that, for a long time, an important part of that history was the idea that leaders were appointed essentially by divine right, but they had it built in to their mythology that divine right could be taken away. So it didn't actually mess with the system that much if you had a dynasty that becomes overthrown because, they lost the mandate of heaven. I don't know what to tell you. The new guys definitely have it, though. We don't need to get into that. We've already slagged off the Church of Latter-day Saints. We don't need to dive into
get you further soft blacklisted from the search engine results.
I am perfectly fine with being blacklisted by the Church of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, they don't have as much.
It would be Scientology that I would be very concerned about pissing off.
Yes.
Given where I live.
Yep.
Very careful about what I say regarding the Church of Scientology.
Gonna stop talking there.
On that note, Bradley, do you want to give us the directed by and written by?
This episode was directed by Rick Famuyiwa, and it was written by Jon Favreau. This was his first episode this season. He will be directing 3 episodes this season.
He has also been elevated to executive producer.
Right, this
Rick
time around.
He will direct the final 2 episodes. He was a writer, or he was a director on previous seasons. He was a director in season 1. He's a director in season 2. He has been upgraded to executive producer. Right. I think in part because Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are getting stretched a little bit.
They got too many balls they're juggling in the air now because you got Ahsoka flying up there all the way at the top, and then you got Mandalorian,
Skeleton Crew and Mando season 4, which they quickly had to write because it looks like a writer's strike is imminent. So they have they've already written season 4, because they just had so many ideas that they wanted to write down during post-production of season 3 that they just went ahead and write season 4. Never mind that there's a WGA writer's strike about to happen. Never mind that they definitely wanted to make sure they had everything.
Yeah.
You know who else has been upgraded in the casting that I know in the crew list that I noticed? Couple of people. Our buddy I'm Watching You, Noah Clore, has been updated to co-producer. He was just a writer on Book of Boba Fett, and he actually will co-write one of the episodes as well this season. So Noah Clore. So I'm so interested in this guy. I need to know more about this person and what he actually does on these shows because his name pops up in all these interesting points. Who are you? What is your job? What's your deal? Also being upgraded in the credits in a really cool way, actually. Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder have actually been upgraded to the main credit. They're actually credited in the main names that go by in every episode. For those of you who may not know, such as Aaron, the Mandalorian is actually played by 3 guys.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Pedro Pascal is the voice and some of it. However, because Pedro Pascal was also filming The Last of Us during season 3, Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder are in the suit the primary amount of the time. So they have actually been upgraded to full credit status for co-playing the Mandalorian. I believe one of them is a motion specialist and one of them is more of a stunt guy, fight choreography guy. I can't remember which one. Both guys bring as much to the Mandalorian as Pedro Pascal does, so it is cool to see them in the credit.
Absolutely.
Curiously, I will say, Tate Fletcher, who has been portraying Paz Vizsla inside the suit, he's been playing Paz Vizsla. We didn't talk about Paz Vizsla in this episode. He's there. It's really interesting to look at his role in this episode in hindsight of what we're going to learn about him in the season. That's all I'm going to say. Tate Fletcher is credited as Paz Vizsla. It sounds like Jon Favreau's still voicing him. He's not credited or uncredited as the voice of Paz Vizsla, but I couldn't find anything that, at least that I could find, that specifically says whether or not Tate Fletcher is now voicing Paz Vizsla as well.
I wonder.
But I
don't know how different it sounds. So I bet you they probably like kind of just slyly just changed it slightly, and then they were just like, oh yeah, now he's just doing both.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, but
it wouldn't at all.
Unclear whether or not Tate Fletcher is actually voicing Paz Vizsla in addition to being in the suit this season, or whether or not that is Jon Favreau again.
I would have to hear it played back side by side.
Yeah, I would have to hear all, I always said pre-Vizsla, all Paz Vizsla. Pre-Vizsla, the worst name for a Star Wars character.
Versus past Vizsla.
Oh my god. So this implies the existence, this implies the existence of a present Vizsla. Mm-hmm. Pre, and then past.
The once and future
this implies,
Vizsla.
He really believes in Book of Boba Fett. He's the once and future Vizsla.
There you go.
He's like, I'm gonna take the Mandalorian Excalibur.
Yeah,
Fuck you.
Yeah. I'm gonna draw the sword from the stone.
Alrighty, well, Bradley, do you want to, are we just going to do final thoughts? I guess.
Yeah, let's just do final thoughts.
We'll
I guess
end.
we can do, we don't have to do like crazy like theories for the episode, but Aaron, you could give us one, your final thoughts, and then two, maybe like, I want to know like your perspective where you think the season's going or what you think that might be coming up. Because we obviously know, but like, I'm curious to see what your thought process is of like what possibly is the storylines coming up.
I think that I've already forgotten what I've said like 30 minutes ago because I have the memory of a goldfish.
Aaron remembers tons of details about random historical figures. Does not remember what she was doing an hour ago.
My thoughts are, this is the first time I've been on and not been able to listen to like an episode 0 from you guys. And I don't know what's happening in the future past this. And so my thoughts are, I guess after this, I'm going to go watch all the episodes that are out. Why didn't I watch these earlier? I think there's going to be more factional splintering, more grabs for power, stuff like that. That's what I expect.
It's an interesting theory. My final thought that, I was a little disappointed in this episode when it came out, mostly because it just kind of abruptly ends and we didn't know where it was going. I'm torn because on the one hand, I'm like Chris, there really is no need for them to put it out week to week. But on the other hand, I do understand why they're doing it. So I think retroactively, it will be interesting to see, I like it better in hindsight. I like it better leading in, and some of the stuff, like the stuff with Bo-Katan and the stuff with IG-11, that makes a lot more sense in contrast with where this season is ultimately going. So overall, I do like it. I don't think it's the most solid opening episode. I do think 1 and 2 are a little better. It is better, I think, than the opening episode of Book of Boba Fett, but I will say that they're continuing the negative trends in the writing from Book of Boba Fett onto Mando Season 3. So it'll be interesting to poke around at the next couple of episodes with this one as a foundation. Bradley, what are your final thoughts?
I'll keep it pretty brief. I think it was a decent episode overall, but Aaron, once you watch the second episode, I think you'll probably like it a little bit better. But I think this probably would have been stronger as a 2-episode premiere had they shown the next one. Just something about what happens in the very, very first 5 minutes of the next one just belongs. You need to be able to watch it all at once. And so I think that would have been a little bit stronger of an opening premiere, because it kind of seems, honestly, if you go back and look at them both now that I've watched it, it's kind of like an extra long premiere as the first 2 episodes. And so it would have been a stronger, I think, opening to the season had we gotten both of them. Not that I'm a fan of doing that, but I just, in terms of the story, I think it would have worked. But that's my final.
Alrighty. Aaron, do you have anything that you want to hype up? You've already promoted for Light and Dice, for which I appreciate.
Certainly.
Any pluggables? Because I know you're not a content creator, you're a historian.
Yep, sure.
Anything you want to recommend people go and check out? Or
I highly recommend go learn something new. Just go to a random article, go to the 7th link on that article, click it, and do that a few times and just learn something new. Do this in remembrance of me. And also I have a Twitter that I rarely use, at Aerolloco, AEROLLOCO.
You're in the right place. There. If you see a bird with sunglasses.
With sunglasses, yep.
I'm also, and I don't know if you will agree with me on this, I also recommend Noble Blood, coming off our conversation about leaders. I know that you like that podcast, and that one is about various royal figures throughout history if you want to learn more about leaders that are similar to Bo-Katan.
Dana does such a better job, probably because it's scripted, such a better job summing up all of that stuff than I do.
Well, Aeron, thank you for joining us to talk about the first episode of The Mandalorian from an outsider's perspective, or the first episode of Mandalorian Season 3 from an outsider's perspective, and then also bringing in some history knowledge. We've learned about groups in diaspora. We've learned about leaders and royals in exile. So it's been a fun experience. Thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you for having me back. Fun as always. Fun time.
Thank you. Bradley, I don't think we necessarily have anything. The usual things to promote. Bradley will run the socials in a minute. You can go check me out on For Light and Dice. We are entering our third story arc at time of recording this episode. The first episode of that has not come out, but we have split the party. It is very fun. I get to spend a lot of time with Jess and their fantastic character of Lysander. It's just a great time. Everybody's having fun. You could also watch Queen's Court on Peacock. Bradley was the travel coordinator for that trashy reality show. So we are hyping it up because God knows somebody has to promote this show.
Exactly.
God damn it, it's going to be us.
It's going to be us because I don't know who else is doing it.
Nobody else is promoting this. This random gay Star Wars podcast is the only anything that's promoting that I've seen promoting Queen's Court. But then I'm not in the reality TV sphere because I have self-respect. Alrighty, go ahead and run the socials.
Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gays. Did Charles fuck something up? Send us a message at goldsquadrongays@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Gold Squad Gays. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gays. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gays, where we post the podcast as well as exclusive content. Please join us next week and every week for more of Gold Squadron Gays.
Like most of America, I take what you're saying at face value, and I will agree because it sounds right.